No army in human history has killed as efficiently as an enemy you could never see. Not Roman swords, not cannons, not the bombs of the 20th century. Nothing comes close. Because the most lethal killer ever to walk this earth measured less than 1,000th of a millimeter. It didn't demand ransom, it didn't negotiate, and it could hollow out an entire city before anyone had a chance to understand what was happening. Picture yourself living in the most powerful city of your age. Streets packed with people, markets overflowing, temples, armies. And then one morning, your neighbor wakes up with a fever. The next day, 3 more houses. By the end of the week, the dead are piling up on street corners because there's no one left to bury them. And there's only one thing you can do. Wait your turn. This isn't a film. It happened again and again. And every time, a civilization that believed itself invincible collapsed from within. Today, we're going to walk through every single one of them. And fair warning, the last one didn't decimate a people. It nearly erased one from the face of the earth entirely.
Let's start at the cradle of Western civilization, which came within 3 years of going dark forever. In Athens. The year is 430 BC. The city is living through its golden age. Democracy, philosophy, the Parthenon, freshly built and gleaming above the Acropolis. They're in the middle of a war against Sparta. Yes, but Athens feels safe behind its walls. The problem is that inside those walls, thousands of refugees from the countryside have crowded in. And in that human anthill, something begins to burn. Nobody knows where it came from. It arrived through the port of Piraeus and spread like fire through dry straw. Raging fever, bloodshot eyes, skin covered in pustules. A thirst that nothing could satisfy. People threw themselves into wells trying to cool it and died right there. Do you know how many people it took? Estimates put it at between 1/4 and 1/3 of the entire population of Athens. And it spared no one. Among the dead was Pericles himself, the leader who had turned Athens into the capital of the known world. A man named Thucydides fell ill. He survived, and he wrote everything down with a clinical coldness that still sends chills today. He described how the plague destroyed not just bodies, but morale. People stopped believing in the gods, in the law, in anything at all. Why respect anything when you might be dead tomorrow? Athens held on, but it was never the same. The city that was meant to rule Greece ended up losing the war, and the lesson was carved in stone. An empire doesn't always fall to its enemy. Sometimes it falls to something it can't even see. But this was only the beginning. Centuries later, the greatest empire ever built would discover that its greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. Rome. The year is 165 AD. The legions return victorious from a campaign in the east, loaded with plunder, with glory, and with something else. Without knowing it, they are carrying an invisible passenger. We call it the Antonine Plague. And experts believe it was one of the first great smallpox epidemics in history. What made the empire so powerful was its roads, its trade routes, its armies moving from one end of the Mediterranean to the other. That very network that carried Rome's power everywhere became a highway for disease. What had conquered the world was now infecting it. In the city of Rome alone, as many as 2,000 people were dying every single day. The plague is estimated to have killed around 5 million people in total, and it decimated the legions at the exact moment they were most needed on the frontiers. Even the co-emperor Lucius Verus died, and many historians believe that Marcus Aurelius himself, the philosopher-emperor, succumbed to its effects years later. Much of what we know today we owe to Galen, the most celebrated physician of antiquity, who lived through the horror firsthand and recorded every detail. The fever that wouldn't break, the thirst, the diarrhea, and those black pustules that began spreading across the body of the sick around the 9th day. That's why many also call it
the Plague of Galen. Not even the finest doctor in the empire, the man who would lay the foundations of medicine for the next 1,000 years, could do anything but observe, take notes, and pray. Rome didn't collapse that day, but something cracked in it forever. The empire that seemed fashioned by the gods had just taken its first blow from an enemy no legion could march against. And the most unsettling part is that it wasn't even the worst blow it would suffer. Because 3 centuries later came something that didn't just kill. It redrew the map of the world. Constantinople. The year is 541. Emperor Justinian is dreaming of rebuilding the old Roman Empire in its full glory. And he's on the verge of pulling it off. His generals are reconquering territories. His capital is the crown jewel of the planet. And then, from a shipment of Egyptian grain, death disembarks. Its true name we know today thanks to DNA extracted from ancient skeletons. Yersinia pestis, the bacterium of the plague. The same one that would resurface centuries later under a name everyone recognizes. It traveled in fleas. The fleas traveled on rats. And the rats traveled on every ship, every sack of wheat, every caravan crossing the most connected empire of its time. The chronicler Procopius described how at the peak of the epidemic, as many as 10,000 people were dying per day in Constantinople alone. Corpses piled up so fast that the towers of the city walls were filled with bodies and sealed shut. The city lost close to 40% of its inhabitants, and over the years, the plague may have taken tens of millions of lives across the entire Mediterranean. Justinian's dream of resurrecting Rome evaporated. There weren't enough soldiers, not enough farmers to work the land, no money, no future. A single bacterium accomplished what no barbarian army had ever managed. It buried forever the possibility of a restored Roman Empire. The history of Europe, as you know it, bent in that moment because of an insect the size of a seed. Imagine that 1 out of every 2 people you know simply disappears within 4 years. Your family, your neighbors, your friends, half of them, gone. That is exactly what Europe lived through between 1347 and 1350-1. Yersinia pestis was back. Justinian's old acquaintance. But this time it found a continent that was more populated, more urban, and completely defenseless. In 1346, a Mongol army was besieging the city of Kaffa on the Crimean Peninsula, but the plague began cutting through the besiegers themselves. So they did something monstrous. They loaded the infected corpses onto their catapults and launched them over the walls into the city. One of the first documented uses of a biological weapon in history. The Genoese merchants trapped inside fled by sea, and they took death with them. In October of 1347, their ships docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. When the authorities boarded, most of the crew was already dead or dying, with strange, dark swellings on their necks and armpits. They were called the Death Ships. It was already too late. In just 4 years, the Black Death swept away between 1/3 and 1/2 of the entire population of Europe, an estimated 25 to 50 million people. Entire villages were left empty. People lost their minds. Some took to the roads in processions of flagellants, lashing their own backs until they bled, trying to appease the wrath of God. Others, desperate for someone to blame, unleashed horrific massacres against entire communities they accused, without a shred of evidence, of having poisoned the wells. Because when fear takes hold of a civilization, fear kills almost as much as the disease itself. People believed it was God's punishment, the end of the world. And the strangest thing is that, in a way, that apocalypse changed Europe for the better. With so few workers left alive, those who survived could finally demand wages, rights, freedom. The old feudal world began to crack apart on top of a mountain of graves. Death, for once, opened the door to a new world. But the story doesn't end there. because everything you've seen so far never managed to wipe a civilization off the face of the earth. What came next was not a plague, it was an extinction. We crossed the Atlantic to the American continent at the start of the 16th century. Enormous and sophisticated civilizations had flourished here, with cities that left even Europeans speechless. The Aztec Empire, with its capital, Tenochtitlan, a city built on a lake larger than almost any city in Europe. The Inca Empire, stretching across the Andes, millions and millions of people. And then the Spanish ships arrived. But the most lethal conqueror wasn't Hernán Cortés, not his horses, not his cannons. It was something his men carried in their blood without knowing it. The peoples of the Americas had spent tens of thousands of years isolated from the rest of the world. They had never had contact with smallpox, measles, typhus, or influenza. Their bodies had no defenses whatsoever, so when those diseases disembarked, they didn't find resistance. They found a feast. Out in 1520, while Cortés was fighting to take Tenochtitlan, a smallpox outbreak tore through the city. It killed an enormous portion of the population, including the very leader who had succeeded Moctezuma. Imagine trying to defend your capital while an invisible plague kills your soldiers in their own beds. The city fell to germs. Decades later, between 1545 and 1548, an epidemic arrived that the Aztecs called Cocolistli, raging fevers, hemorrhages, death within days.
Recent ancient DNA studies point to a type of salmonella as a possible culprit. The result? It killed between 5 and 15 million people, up to 80% of the native population of the region. Historians estimate that diseases carried over from the Old World wiped out up to 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas. Entire cultures, languages, bodies of knowledge, whole dynasties, erased not over centuries, but within a few generations. The devastation was so immense that some scientists believed the sheer volume of farmland left abandoned, reclaimed by jungle and forest, was enough to actually cool the climate of the entire planet. Read that again. So many people died that the earth itself grew colder. That is what it truly means for a plague to erase a civilization, to make it vanish almost completely. And maybe, after all of this, you're thinking, that's ancient history. People back then had no idea what a microbe even was. We have hospitals, vaccines, and modern science. Something like that could never happen to us. Let me take you back just over 100 years, to a world that already had electricity, telephones, airplanes, and doctors who knew perfectly well what germs were. The year was 1918. The planet had just crawled out of the wreckage of the First World War. Then came what would be misnamed the Spanish flu. And note, it didn't even originate in Spain. It earned that label simply because Spain, being neutral in the war, was one of the few countries that didn't censor the news. Every other major power buried the scale of the disaster to keep their troops from losing morale. The disease advanced in silence, concealed behind wartime propaganda. It didn't prey mainly on the elderly or young children, as you might expect. It killed the strong and the healthy, people in their 20s and 30s, in the prime of their lives. A soldier could wake up in the morning feeling perfectly fine and be dead before nightfall, drowned by his own fluid-filled lungs. There were trains that departed packed with recruits and arrived at their destination carrying nothing but corpses. It reached every corner of the globe, frozen villages in Alaska, isolated islands in the middle of the Pacific. Nowhere on Earth was safe. When the final count came in, it's estimated the flu infected 1/3 of all humanity and killed somewhere between 50 and 100 million people in just over 2 years. More deaths than the entire World War that had just ended. Quite possibly the greatest loss of human life in the shortest span of time in all of recorded history. And it happened, in historical terms, practically yesterday. With doctors, with hospitals, with modern governments watching it all unfold and utterly unable to stop it. And here is the thought I want to leave you with, the one that should genuinely keep you up at night. In every single one of these cases, no one saw it coming.
Athens believed it was protected by its walls. Rome trusted its legions. Justinian had his empire. The Aztecs had their gods. And the generation of 1918 had their science. And every last one of them was brought down by something too small to see with the naked eye. We take pride in our medicine, our vaccines, our hospitals, and we're probably right to. But each of those civilizations believed, right up until the very end, that it couldn't happen to them. The most dangerous enemy in all of history has never needed an army. It only needs us to let our guard down.